I work at a big company, you know. I can work enough for both of us, so no worries.
Kenneth had said that during our engagement, but as soon as we got married, he changed his tune. He and Matthew would hurl insults at me daily. On top of that, he managed the money himself and skimped on living expenses. He'd complain nonstop, even though he let me do the cooking. Fed up, I declared divorce to Kenneth and left the house. Later, I bumped into Matthew by chance.
Hey, heard you're getting TANF now.
I was surprised. Huh? You must be mistaking me for someone else.
Don't put on airs.
Matthew smirked.
Listen, we're estranged, okay? Don't come crying to me about having no money. I won't lend you a dime. Remember that.
As I opened my mouth to retort, he had already disappeared into the crowd. I lowered my head, feeling the stares of passers-by, my shoulders shaking. I couldn't suppress my laughter. Poor thing, he knows nothing. I can't wait to see his reaction when he learns the truth. I'm Hannah, a 50-year-old housewife. I married Kenneth 5 years ago. When we met, Kenneth was the picture of a fine young man. We met at a gathering of acquaintances, and I found him fun to talk to and very friendly. As we parted, he said,
I want to meet just the two of us next time.
Feeling sad about saying goodbye, I agreed. When we started dating, he mentioned having a son named Matthew with his ex-wife, who was then in 5th grade. We dined together a few times. He was a bright and pleasant boy, just like his dad. A year later, on the night Kenneth proposed, I took a leap and opened up. You know, I live with my parents while working part-time, right? The company I joined right after graduating was a black company, and it wrecked my health.
Is that so?
It was tough to quit, too. I think long hours will be difficult for me in the future. Then, Kenneth smiled kindly.
Don't worry about it. Just stay at home. Look, I work at a big company. I can work enough for both of us.
Relieved by his words, I accepted his proposal. I was glad to have met a good man and believed we were starting a happy married life. I never imagined tasting despair in less than half a year. As we got used to living as a family of 3, Kenneth and Matthew's attitudes changed drastically. They started ridiculing my actions and words in a light tone.
Mom, are you bedridden again? Where's my sandwich?
Matthew frowned discontentedly as he came into the bedroom before school. I had participated in weeding at a nearby park yesterday and felt ill. It was an unusually hot day, and I had felt unwell since the day before. I had asked Kenneth, but he refused with an irritated look.
Being a housewife must be nice. Slacking off all year? I need my days off, you know? Let me rest.
Okay. Unable to get up the next morning due to pushing myself, I apologized to Matthew. Sorry, Matthew, I couldn't prepare your sandwich, so buy one at the grocery store. Handing him money, Matthew grumbled.
Mom, can't you at least make a sandwich? You always take shortcuts with frozen food or leftovers. You're failing as a mom, if you can't even cook.
His words stung.
Don't blame Mom, Matthew.
Kenneth joined in with a half smile as he passed the hallway.
Since you skimped on the sandwich, tonight's dinner must be lavish. Oh, is that so? Then I'll look forward to it. Being a housewife, you should have plenty of time for dinner, right? You're not sleeping until the evening, are you? Make sure to clean thoroughly, without slacking.
The two of them nonchalantly laughed at my poor condition, dropping their insensitive lines before leaving. As if I could prepare a lavish meal. Lying in bed and staring at the ceiling, I let out a heavy sigh. Because Kenneth is an extreme penny pincher. Despite being a section chief at a big company and earning a high salary, the living expenses he gave me were ridiculously low.
It's my salary, so why should my wife manage it?
After we married, Kenneth insisted on this, and I, not opposing, meekly followed. I believed it didn't matter who managed the finances as long as it was done properly. Then Kenneth got carried away and started spending money as he pleased. It's necessary for work. Drinking expenses are business expenses. It's essential. Using such reasons as an excuse, he would buy expensive clothes and watches for himself, but make a sour face even when I bought cheap snacks. Since he insisted that a housewife doesn't need an allowance, I had to report to Kenneth and get permission to spend money whenever I went to the hair salon or bought clothes.
One pair of jeans is enough, isn't it? You're buying more?
I want a warm pair for winter.
Fine. Buy them at a cheap store.
I also want to get a haircut. Can I go to the hair salon once every 2 months to maintain my hairstyle?
Huh? What's the point of you trying to be fashionable? If you keep your hair long, you only need to cut it once every 6 months. I won't allow haircuts.
That's why I'm only allowed to buy cheap makeup from drugstores. I want to switch to something better because it's rough on my skin. But he won't listen. Moreover, the living expenses he gives are a third of the average. Within this budget, our nutrition will be unbalanced. I lamented, to which Kenneth responded with a raised chin.
On that TV savings show, they managed to live on this amount.
They had a farmer-in-law providing vegetables and bread. It's impossible with these high prices.
That's your job to manage.
I was distressed by the thriftiness in living expenses, but what I couldn't stomach was about the wreath for Dad's funeral. When Dad, who had been ill, passed away, and it was time to send a wreath, Kenneth visibly grimaced.
We don't need to send a wreath for the funeral, right?
Anyone attending the funeral, other than the chief mourner, should send one.
Really? Then use your savings. It's none of my business.
He said this to me as I prepared for the funeral with tears in my eyes. His utter lack of concern infuriated me. I never planned to ask you for it, so don't worry.
Good. But do Matthew and I really have to go? Our long weekend will be ruined, and I hate that. Right, Dad? I had plans to play a new game.
Although they grumbled, I never doubted they would come. However, Kenneth and Matthew arrived late, barely greeting my mom and relatives, and left swiftly. My exhausted mom didn't seem to have the energy to blame them, but my relatives were furious.
What's the meaning of this, Kenneth? Your wife's father died, and you're too cold?
Matthew, you've received so many gifts and allowances from Hannah's dad. While I apologized to my relatives, I felt my love for the two of them rapidly cooling. Kenneth, always in stylish suits with a refreshing aura, and Matthew attending a prestigious university. Well regarded as a handsome father and son in the neighborhood, they only hurled insults at me at home. They wouldn't come straight home after work or school, wandering around and returning with lipstick and perfume scents. Despite doing as they pleased, they treated me like a housekeeper, demanding lavish meals with a meager food budget. Lately, when I served dishes with chicken or pork, both would glare at me with disdain and hurl insults.
Don't you want to serve your husband good food after he returns from work? If I get sick from eating this poor food, how will you take responsibility? Are you even a mom?
I can make delicious meals, even with chicken or pork. Besides, disliking vegetables and fish, you'll get sick with such a picky diet.
I'm saying I'd eat, if it were high quality. Don't complain when you can't satisfy us. I don't need advice from someone as frail as you.
They used to eat while complaining, but lately, they just leave the food untouched. Yet, if I don't cook,
are you slacking off even though you're a wife?
They would yell. I eat the leftovers for breakfast or lunch the next day. But tears well up, wondering for whom I'm cooking. As for their meals, they subsist on store-bought sandwiches, instant ramen, and snack foods. Eventually, Kenneth was diagnosed as pre-diabetic in a company health check, and Matthew started gaining weight. It was an inevitable outcome. Then they lashed out at me.
What kind of wife makes her husband and child sick? We don't need a useless person like you. We're getting a divorce.
Then I'll leave. They were surprised when I agreed easily.
Are you sure? You're unemployed. You've been living off me. How will you survive now?
Don't worry about me. I'll send the divorce papers for you to sign later. Please leave my stuff until the movers come to pick it up.
Nobody's going to take your stuff.
Kenneth sneered.
You'll definitely regret divorcing a high-earning, handsome guy like me. A kind husband who lets you be a housewife with 3 meals and naps. There's no one else like that in the world, right? That's right. You've been living in luxury on Dad's money till now. You'll struggle from here on.
While I packed clothes into my suitcase, Kenneth and Matthew kept talking endlessly behind me. Honestly, I envy Kenneth's ability to overestimate himself so much. When we were dating, I saw this part of him as confident and shining.
You'll just go back to your parents, right? Say hi to your pensioner mom for me. You two will be heading straight to poverty. Matthew, I bet they'll end up on TANF soon.
Matthew laughed at Kenneth's prediction.
They already reek of poverty, but with Grandma, it'll be the ultimate. The funeral the other day was nothing special. It smelled like poverty. I thought so too. Like a poor family's funeral. I want a lavish one, Matthew. Got it, Dad. But for Dad, who works at a big company, and me, attending a prestigious university, poverty is a different world.
Their endless comments infuriated me, but realizing it was pointless to respond, I let it all go. After returning home and explaining everything to Mom, she lowered her voice. At the funeral, seeing Kenneth and Matthew, I felt something wasn't right, but I thought it's not good to interfere too much in my daughter's household and kept silent. I was too preoccupied with Dad's care. I'm sorry for barging in like this. It's okay. I've been lonely without you. Why don't you stay here? Thanks. But once I get my job on track, I plan to move to an apartment. Mom's concern was comforting, but living with her might make me too dependent. Living nearby and visiting occasionally would be the right balance. Yes, Kenneth and Matthew mocked me as unemployed, but in fact, I've been working from home. It all started with the budget recipes I posted on my blog. After receiving many positive comments, I boldly launched a cooking site and shared my recipes, which quickly gained readers and internet fame. Soon after, an editor from a major publisher approached me, and now I'm gradually preparing to publish a cookbook. Thanks to this, I had no time to dwell on the divorce, and days flew by. One day, my phone rang insistently. I paused, stirring the ingredients in the pan, and answered the phone. Hello?
Hey, what's this about a deposit for the divorce trial?
I sighed, knowing it was about that. You and Matthew hurled endless abuse at me.
Oh, I thought, never mind.
Relief in his voice, Kenneth continued.
I didn't cheat or anything, you know? What? Did you record me and Matthew? Your memory alone won't cut it.
I've noted everything in my diary.
Try and claim it if you can. Really, poor people and their obsession with money, you reek of frugality. If you think you can get a deposit for the divorce trial, go ahead.
After his outburst, Kenneth hung up. I finished cooking and visited a detective agency, requesting an investigation into Kenneth's background. Soon, his affair with a subordinate was uncovered. The day after sending the 2-shot photos and investigation report to his company, Kenneth contacted me again.
You, spreading this at work is low. The angry manager reported it to the higher-ups, and now I'm fired.
Oh, she was the manager's daughter, wasn't she? It's your fault for cheating, knowing they're strict about such matters. I continued laughing. But you shouldn't have any trouble, right? With all the saving you did, you must have plenty of savings. Aren't you and Matthew living luxuriously?
Matthew moved into a dormitory this spring because commuting was tough. Damn. I have prepaid dorm fees and apartment loans. My savings? Drained by that woman. She was two-timing me with a younger guy.
Sounds tough for you, but it's none of my concern. Oh, and about the divorce trial deposit? I'll also take half the value of the apartment for distribution of property. When the invoice arrives, please transfer the full amount to my account. Kenneth was yelling on the other side, but I hung up without a care. One day, while returning from shopping in town, I bumped into Matthew. Dressed in his usual flashy fashion, with piercings all over his face, and his attention-grabbing hairstyle, he was easy to spot from a distance. Seeing me, Matthew raised his hand in greeting.
Hey, heard you're getting TANF.
I looked puzzled. Huh? Who are you mistaking me for?
Don't put on airs,
Matthew said, smirking.
It's obvious where an unemployed old lady like you would end up. If you had just obediently followed me and Dad, you'd still be living a comfortable life. It's pathetic, really.
Angry, I couldn't help but retort. Receiving TANF is a citizen's right. Any one of us could need it someday, due to illness or an accident. It's wrong to look down on that.
Yeah. So you're saying you're receiving it too?
Matthew said, dismissing me with a smirk and pointing his finger at me.
Listen, you and I are estranged. Don't come crying to me for money. Remember that.
As I opened my mouth to reply, he turned his back and disappeared into the crowd. I lowered my head, conscious of the stares of passers-by, shaking my shoulders. I couldn't help but laugh. It was just too ridiculous. Poor thing, he knows nothing. I can't wait to see his reaction when he finds out the truth. A few days later, I woke up and checked my phone to find an unbelievable number of missed calls from Matthew. Reluctantly, I called back, and Matthew shouted at me furiously.
You deceived me, old woman.
What are you talking about?
I heard from a cousin. You got 3 high-rise apartments from Grandpa's inheritance and are living a carefree life. Hiding that and getting a divorce is cowardly.
That's my personal asset. Why should I have to tell you or Kenneth?
It's joint property. You should have done a distribution of property with Dad during the divorce.
Unfortunately, it became mine after the divorce procedures, so I can't give it to Kenneth. Officially, I knew from Dad's will that it would be mine, but I delayed the procedures until after the divorce because I didn't want to share it with Kenneth. Then Matthew shouted in frustration.
A rich woman like you getting TANF? I'll report you to the authorities right now.
Feel free. It's not me, but Kenneth who's receiving it. Matthew fell silent.
What?
I told you last time, it's not me. I explained as if speaking to a child. Honestly, even without the inheritance, I can live well. I have income from the cooking site and book sales I started in secret, but Kenneth, after spending all his money on his affair, had lots of payments piling up and was borrowing heavily. When his affair was discovered and he was fired, his income stopped. Are you listening?
Dad's on TANF? No way.
Ah! I pulled the phone away from my ear as Matthew screamed. Waiting for him to calm down, I continued. You really didn't know anything. He's too proud to tell his son. According to relatives he begged money from, he's behind on his apartment rent, facing eviction, and now stays at home all day in an old apartment. If you're worried, why don't you contact him? There was silence on the other side for a while. Then Matthew said resentfully,
You're cold-hearted. After all Dad did for you, you have no intention of repaying the favor. If you have money, you should give some to Dad.
Why should I? Ever since our marriage, it's been nothing but unpleasant memories, I don't feel indebted, I stated coldly. If you're so concerned, why don't you, his son, lend him money? You're working part-time after all.
I don't have savings. The part-time pay goes to, hanging out with friends and stuff.
Matthew suddenly became evasive, and I smirked. You've been living quite lavishly for a student. Borrowing money to hang out at clubs is not a good idea.
How do you know that?
The other day in town, I saw you from across the street. After we parted, you met up with a girl at a club and entered a brand store arm in arm. Also, a club membership card was left at the house, and using my credit card for shopping without my permission is out of the question. Matthew stammered in response.
That's unfair. You got high-rise apartments from Grandpa. Why don't I or Dad get a share? This is discrimination.
Yeah. The credit card bill will be sent soon. Make sure you pay it. Before I could finish, the call was disconnected. Sighing, I ended the call too. Just when I thought it was all over, a few months later, Kenneth and Matthew showed up at my parents' house without any notice. The doorbell rang incessantly, and when I answered, it was the two of them. Expecting they came to borrow money, I let them into the house to avoid causing a disturbance in the neighborhood. Kenneth and Matthew, who until recently were so stylish, now appeared drastically changed. Wearing wrinkled shirts and dirty trousers, their eyes lifeless and gaunt. But they still had the energy to be sarcastic. Entering the living room, Kenneth looked around and sneered with a half-smile.
Same old house, huh? Why not sell one of those high-rise apartments and rebuild this place? Do something nice for Mom, living miserably on her pension.
This is Dad's house, and we like it this way. More importantly, when are you two planning to pay me back? You're past the deadline. Kevin lifted his chin arrogantly and said,
Hannah, I'll forgive you now, so let's remarry.
What?
You started a cooking site, right? If you manage the household perfectly, I'll even let you work, so come back. Such a generous dad, forgiving the wife who abandoned her husband and child. So Mom, why not live with Dad again? Living with just two women must be insecure.
Stunned, I was speechless. After a moment, intense anger welled up inside me. Don't joke with me. How much more do you plan to ridicule me? Furious, I yelled at the astonished Kenneth and Matthew. After treating me like nothing more than a housewife, hurling abuse, not providing proper living expenses, and then driving me out? Now you want me back just because you found out I inherited high-rise apartments? No way.
What? You're going to abandon us? Rich people really are stingy. Knowing we're struggling with money and still demanding payment, you're heartless. You were poor yourself until recently. Don't get cocky.
In the midst of the argument, Mom returned from shopping. Kenneth and Matthew immediately started buttering her up.
Please, lend us the money. We'll probably pay it back. Besides, isn't it unfair that only Hannah gets Grandpa's inheritance? Give me one of the high-rise apartments, too. Hi, Grandma. Long time no see. How have you been, Grandma? Please persuade Mom to remarry. Dad doesn't want to break up, but Mom is being stubborn.
Mom, surprised at first, changed her expression upon hearing their lines. She placed her echo bag on the fridge's floor and let out a deep sigh. So shameless, both of you.
What?
I'm telling you to have some shame. Startled by Mom's sudden loud voice, Kenneth and Matthew were understandably confused. Mom, usually calm, scolded them sharply. I've heard everything about the divorce from Hannah. I can't believe you have the nerve to show up here.
No. Hannah's exaggerating. You have to listen to our side, too. That's right, Grandma. Mom is quite the liar.
I remember how well you two behaved at my husband's funeral. Mom cut off Matthew's words and continued sternly. Arriving nonchalantly late to the funeral? not greeting me or the relatives, yawning through the service, and leaving before the coffin was sent off. And now you dare ask for his inheritance. Go back to sleep." She drove a taken aback Kenneth and Matthew to the front door and glared at them one last time. "You two are now strangers to us. Don't come here again. If you do, I'll call the police." Mom threw their shoes out the door, forcing them to leave in their socks, and immediately locked the front door. Kenneth, who had been avoiding paying me, was advised by his lawyer that a lawsuit would cost even more. Reluctantly, he finally transferred the money to my account. Even though Kenneth was fired from his job, he couldn't find another one, and the in-laws, hearing about their son's situation from relatives, stepped in to cover his debts. They visited my parents' house and apologized profusely for Kenneth's troubles. Later, Kenneth, having given up on finding a new job, returned to the countryside under the guise of helping with the family's farming. However, the story of our divorce spread through the village, leading to both children and elders pointing and laughing at Kenneth.
"There's thrifty Uncle Kenneth."
Even with the degree from a good university and a job at a big company, what's the use if your wife leaves you for being too arrogant?
"The reason for his divorce from his first wife was also his reckless spending. He'll never change."
Being mocked by the villagers is embarrassing. Remarry me to show them."
I kept receiving such persistent messages from Kenneth, so I deleted his contact. His mistress, apparently no longer interested after the money ran out, had long since left him. I found her with the detective's help and made sure she paid the divorce trial's security deposit. I also made Matthew reimburse for the card he used without permission. Though enrolled in a prestigious university and on track to become an elite like his father, Matthew started skipping classes and playing around, leading to failing grades and eventual expulsion. His friends and girlfriends were concerned, but Matthew, in his arrogance, alienated them with his prideful remarks. He then had a major argument with Kenneth, saying,
"You're my son, yet you won't help repay the debt?"
Now they're estranged. Matthew lives alone in a small apartment, making ends meet with part-time jobs. Gone are the days of buying whatever he wanted and enduring sarcastic remarks despite high earnings. For me, it's a refreshing change. With my cooking side taking off and a book deal finalized, I moved to the top floor of the high-rise apartment inherited from Dad. Mom is still healthy at 73. The high-rise is close to our family home, so it's convenient if anything happens to her. I'm planning a surprise hot spring trip for Mom's upcoming birthday. Though my marriage was a failure, I want to continue having a good relationship with Mom.